The sun beat down on the sleek rows of luxury homes in Silver Pines Estates, a brand new housing development nestled just outside a wealthy suburb in Georgia. The freshly laid lawns gleamed under the sprinkler spray, and white picket fences still smelled of new paint. Open house signs flapped lightly in the warm spring breeze, and polished SUVs filled the street. Cheryl Whitmore, the lead realtor for the development, adjusted her designer sunglasses and pasted on her showroom smile. She stood at the entrance to the model home, clipboard in hand, greeting each visitor like royalty, or sorting them like airport security. The way she spoke was sugar-dipped, but only to the ones she deemed worthy. When she saw the next car pull up, a modest but clean sedan with a black family of 4 inside, Cheryl's smile faltered for half a second. Out stepped James and Alia Carter, dressed professionally. James in a button-down shirt and slacks, Alia in a floral dress with a matching bag. Their children, both under 10, held hands as they admired the houses. Alia beamed as they approached. "Hi, we have an appointment to see Lot 14. We're really excited. It's the perfect layout for our family." Cheryl barely concealed her condescension. "Oh, yes, Lot 14, she said, glancing at her clipboard, but not flipping the page. "Actually, I'm sorry, but that lot is already under strong consideration. These homes move fast." James raised an eyebrow. "The listing still shows available online. We confirmed with your office just yesterday." "I'm sure that was a misunderstanding," Cheryl said, her voice turning slightly brittle. "But you're welcome to take a quick look at the model home, just to get a feel for the community." She emphasized the last word like a warning. The Carters exchanged a glance but nodded graciously. Inside, Cheryl gave them a rushed tour, barely pausing to explain the details she had shared eagerly with the white couple just before them. She didn't ask what James did for a living. She didn't comment on Alia's interest in the kitchen space. She didn't offer a brochure. When Alia politely asked about the financing process, Cheryl gave a tight smile. "We typically work with buyers who have extensive local references. And of course, cash offers are highly prioritized in Silver Pines." As they stepped back outside, Cheryl already turned away, waving cheerfully at another couple across the street. James held the car door open for his wife, then got in silently. Their children asked softly from the back seat, "Are we still going to move here?" James gripped the steering wheel. "Maybe," he said, a small smile forming. "But if we do, we're not just moving into one house." He turned the car around slowly, glancing once more at the polished neighborhood that had just shut them out. "We're going to change the entire zip code." A week had passed since the Carters had visited Silver Pines Estates, and Cheryl Whitmore had already forgotten their names. She sat in her office, a pristine corner unit of the real estate firm that managed luxury properties across the region, scanning through updated buyer forms and scheduled tours. Her days were usually predictable: wealthy clients, quick commissions, and the occasional social function to build her brand. But this morning, something odd caught her eye. 4 properties, all under contract, were listed with the same private LLC, Melrose Equity Partners. Cheryl frowned. The name didn't ring any bells. Most investment groups she dealt with were run by developers or cash-flush foreign buyers looking for quick flips. This LLC was local, recently registered, and, most strangely, buying at full price with no haggling. She picked up her phone and called the legal office to ask who had signed the contracts. "Let me check," said the assistant. A moment later, she added, "Looks like the signatory is a James Carter. You probably met him. He came in to tour a property last week." Cheryl sat up straighter. James Carter. That name sparked a memory she had dismissed too quickly. The black family with the modest sedan, the polite voices, the ones she had waved off like window shoppers. "No," she muttered aloud. "That can't be the same man." But it was. Across town, in a sleek co-working office overlooking downtown, James Carter clicked through a spreadsheet. His face was calm but focused. Beside him sat Alia, reviewing design renderings and staging plans. Their 2 children played quietly in the corner, munching snacks as if nothing extraordinary was happening. Even though their parents were midway through acquiring 6 homes in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the county. "Lot 14 is ours," Alia said, highlighting the cell with a yellow tag. James nodded. "And Lot 15's closing next Friday. We'll hold that one for rental income. The others can be flipped or sold to the families we talked about." They were building something bigger than just a move. They were building equity, not just financial, but generational. See, what Cheryl hadn't asked that day at the open house was what James did. If she had, she would have learned he was the managing partner of a private investment group specializing in real estate redevelopment and community ownership initiatives, and that Aliyah, his wife, was an architect who had designed several award-winning community housing projects across the Southeast. But Cheryl hadn't asked because she hadn't seen them. Back at the real estate office, Cheryl stared at the computer screen, confusion flickering across her face as more lots updated to pending, under contract, all under the same name, Melrose Equity Partners. She didn't know it yet, but her idea of who belonged in Silver Pines was about to be rewritten, street by street. Cheryl Whitmore tapped her manicured nails against the granite countertop in the model home, her smile just slightly too tight as she handed a brochure to yet another couple. But her eyes kept darting to the updated sales board behind her. Red tags, pending, were spreading across the layout map like spilled wine, and most of them were marked under Melrose Equity. She didn't like it, not one bit. In her world, every buyer had a profile, background, income source, cultural fit. It wasn't written policy, of course, but everyone in her firm knew what that meant, and this was off script. Cheryl stormed into her office the moment the open house ended. She called the head developer, Graham Ellis, a longtime client and one of her key connections. "Graham, are you seeing this?" she demanded, scrolling through contracts. "Half the properties are getting scooped up by this Melrose group. They're not local. They're not even visible on LinkedIn." Graham sounded amused. "You should be happy. They're paying full price, no contingencies. What's the problem?" Cheryl hesitated. "It's just, we don't know who these people are. It could shift the whole feel of the neighborhood." "Cheryl," Graham said flatly, "the only feel I care about is the one in my bank account." Click. Across town, James and Aaliyah Carter met quietly with three families at a local community center. All of them black middle-class professionals who had grown tired of being priced out, talked down to, or ignored in their own city. James passed out folders. "These are your homes," he said simply. "The lots are secured. The paperwork is clean. You'll move in with equity already in hand." The families looked stunned. "You mean we're not just renting?" one woman asked. "No," Aliyah said with a smile. "You're building. You're planting roots." In their vision, Silver Pines wouldn't just be a gated community of exclusivity. It would become a beacon of shared ownership, where families could live, thrive, and belong. They weren't here to start trouble. They were here to shift the balance. Meanwhile, Cheryl began noticing a pattern. Families touring the neighborhood who looked nothing like her usual clients. Friendly, warm, but not easily impressed. They asked real questions about property taxes and zoning. They walked the neighborhood in groups. They shook hands like neighbors before they even moved in. And one by one, they weren't calling her. She tried to intercept a young couple looking at Lot 22. "I'm happy to represent you," she offered quickly. "We could get you in ahead of schedule." The man looked at her politely. "Thanks, but we've already been working with the developers directly." "Through Mr. Carter." Cheryl blinked. "Mr. Carter," she repeated, as if tasting something unfamiliar. The development she thought she controlled was no longer orbiting her son, and the neighborhood she once thought she was curating, it was growing without her. It was late afternoon when Cheryl spotted James Carter standing by the fountain at the Silver Pines roundabout. He was speaking with a landscaper, casually discussing native plant alternatives for the front yards of several lots. There was no entourage, no clipboard, just a calm, commanding presence. Cheryl didn't wait. She strode across the street in her designer heels, practiced smile in place, but eyes sharp. "Mr. Carter," she called out. James turned, polite but unsurprised. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, "good afternoon." She gestured around, trying to keep her voice light. "I've been meaning to speak with you. I'm sure you've noticed things are moving quickly out here." James nodded. "They are. Efficiency is key in development." Cheryl laughed a little too tightly. "Of course. I just wasn't aware that you were so involved. When we first met, you assumed I was a janitor," James said evenly. Not angry, just factual. Cheryl paused, mouth open for a split second. I, well, perhaps I misunderstood. You didn't misunderstand, he replied calmly. You made a decision based on a story you told yourself the moment you saw me. Her cheeks flushed. I didn't mean to offend you. James tilted his head slightly. You didn't offend me. You revealed yourself. That's different. There was no venom in his words, just clarity. Cheryl shifted gears. So, may I ask what your end goal is with these properties? It's highly unusual for a new investor to buy into this volume so quickly. James gave a faint smile. My goal is simple: to build a neighborhood that reflects equity, opportunity, and dignity. One where families like mine don't have to knock on a dozen doors to feel welcome. Where ownership is generational, not just aspirational. But why here? She asked. Silver Pines was designed to be exclusive. That's precisely why. He turned to face her fully. You gate your communities to keep people out. I invest in them to invite people in. Cheryl tried to laugh, deflecting. You sound like you're running for office. James didn't smile this time. I'm not here for applause. I'm here for access. For my children and for every family you quietly redirected over the years. He nodded toward a row of homes, where a young black couple with a baby stroller were walking with a sense of ownership already in their step. See them. They didn't come here to fit in. They came to claim space. And I made sure they had the chance you never gave us. Cheryl followed his gaze, something tight curling in her chest. Not just shame, not just surprise, loss. She had built her career on polished control, of perception, of power, of who belonged. But James hadn't fought her. He had simply built around her. And now the future of Silver Pines was no longer one she had shaped, but one she would have to live with. James looked back at her warm but firm. Silver Pines will still be beautiful, but it'll be better now, because it will finally look like the world outside your gate. Then he turned and walked away, joining his wife across the street as they reviewed new floor plans. Cheryl stood alone, surrounded by homes she no longer understood, in a neighborhood she'd soon realize had outgrown her. A few weeks later, the sky above Silver Pines Estates glowed with string lights, and the smell of grilled food hung sweet in the evening air. Lawn chairs were scattered across the cul-de-sac. Kids laughed as they chased bubbles, and soft jazz drifted from a portable speaker. It was the first Silver Pines Community Night, a new event organized by the homeowners themselves, not by the developer, not by the real estate firm, but by the residents. And for the first time in Cheryl Whitmore's memory, the neighborhood felt human. She wasn't planning to attend, but something inside her, curiosity, maybe guilt, pulled her toward the laughter echoing down the street. She walked from her car with tentative steps, heels clicking against the sidewalk. As she approached, she saw them, James and Aaliyah Carter, surrounded by families, laughing, hugging, talking like old friends. Their kids ran with others, racing scooters and tossing glow-in-the-dark rings. There was no velvet rope, no gate, no pretense, just belonging. Cheryl kept to the edge, awkward and unsure, until Aaliyah caught her eye and waved. Cheryl hesitated, then waved back. Moments later, James walked toward her with a calm confidence. He wasn't smug. He wasn't cold. He simply carried himself like a man who no longer needed to explain why he was here. Didn't expect to see you, he said, handing her a glass of lemonade. I didn't expect to come, Cheryl admitted. But I wanted to see for myself. He nodded. It's different, isn't it? She looked around. The laughter, the warmth, the music, the smiles. Families of all backgrounds mingling like they'd lived here for years. It is, she said quietly. It's better. James smiled, sipping his drink. This is what we wanted from the start, he said. Not a house, a neighborhood. A place where our kids could grow up seeing themselves in the people next door. Cheryl looked down for a moment, her voice soft. I was wrong about you, about all of this. James didn't rub it in. You weren't the only one, he replied, but you get to choose who you are next. She looked up at him, grateful, humbled, then glanced around again at what this place had become. Later that night, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, James stood to say a few words to the gathered families. This isn't just a development, he said. It's a declaration that we belong everywhere. Our hearts and our hard work lead us. That our presence is not a disruption, it's an asset. The crowd erupted in applause. Cheryl clapped too, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. She finally saw them for who they were, not intruders, but builders. It didn't happen all at once, but it happened faster than Cheryl Whitmore expected. The neighborhood's image began to change, not with loud announcements, but with small, visible actions, the kind that couldn't be ignored. There were now more strollers on the sidewalks during morning walks, Black families, Latinx families, Asian families, mingling with the older white residents who had moved in first. Gardens bloomed with personality. Driveways were filled with bikes and chalk art, and a new book-sharing box was installed by the community playground. And more than anything, the tone shifted. People greeted one another by name. Barbecues were no longer private. Teens helped elders carry groceries. The community started to feel connected. And Cheryl? She was beginning to feel like the guest. Once the reigning gatekeeper of Silver Pines, she now watched as newer homeowners skipped her entirely. The buyers she once filtered out were showing up with full cash offers, not seeking approval, just keys. At the firm's next sales meeting, her colleague showed her a fresh marketing flyer. Says here Silver Pines is becoming one of the most inclusive neighborhoods in the state, he said, tapping the line with his pen. Diversity is attracting more interest than ever. Big article coming in the regional paper. Cheryl stared at the image. A mixed family playing on the lawn, 2 toddlers in a splash pad, an older black couple seated on a porch swing. She gave a small, tight smile. We never sold it that way. No, her colleague said. But they did. Across town, James and Aaliyah sat in their living room. Not just homeowners, but architects of the new Silver Pines. Aaliyah scrolled through the feature article on her tablet. They're calling us the most culturally resilient zip code in the county, James chuckled. That's a nice way of saying they underestimated us. But it wasn't about the headlines. It never was. Their goal had never been to prove a point to Cheryl or people like her. It was to build what their children could inherit. Not just assets, but a sense of place. Legacy wasn't about who owned the land first. It was about who had the courage to plant something new in it. The community hall at Silver Pines was full that Saturday evening, filled with the hum of laughter, the scent of catered food, and the subtle sound of a string quartet playing near the back. Twinkling lights were strung from beam to beam, and framed photographs of new homeowners lined the walls. Snapshots of young couples, multi-generational families, and kids riding bikes on fresh sidewalks. It was the first official Silver Pines homeowners celebration, hosted to honor the people who had helped transform the development into one of the most inclusive neighborhoods in the region. And at the top of the program, a keynote address from James and Aaliyah Carter. Cheryl sat quietly toward the back, hands folded in her lap. For once, she wasn't there as the realtor in charge. She wasn't a decision maker. She wasn't being honored. She was a guest. When her name had appeared on the invite list, she hesitated. But the handwritten note that accompanied it, from Aaliyah herself, said simply, "You helped build this neighborhood, whether you meant to or not." Now, as the Carters took the stage to thunderous applause, Cheryl swallowed the lump rising in her throat. Aaliyah spoke first, her voice clear and warm. "We started this journey not to prove anyone wrong," she said, "but to prove our families right. That we deserve space, that we deserve safety, that we deserve to see ourselves reflected in the sidewalks and porches of our future." Then James stepped up. This neighborhood was built with lumber and concrete, but what makes it stand is vision. That vision belongs to every family here tonight, to the kids who will grow up never questioning whether they belong, to the elders who paved the way, to the neighbors who chose connection over suspicion. He paused, scanning the crowd, and to those who changed, even when it was hard. Growth takes humility, and humility is rare. His eyes met Cheryl's for a beat. She gave a small nod. When the applause died down, Aaliyah returned to the mic with a final announcement. "We're thrilled to unveil a new program tonight," she said. "A Carter Family Housing Grant, designed to help first-time homebuyers from underserved communities secure funding and mentorship right here in Silver Pines." Gasps and cheers erupted from the room. James smiled. Because this neighborhood isn't just built, it's growing. Cheryl felt her eyes sting. Later, after dinner and dancing began, she approached the couple near the refreshment table. James turned to her with the same calm grace he always had. I was wrong, Cheryl said, her voice quiet. But I'm learning. Aaliyah smiled. That's all we ever hoped for. Cheryl looked around the room at the joy, the beauty, the belonging. And for the first time in years, she felt hope, not for the deals she used to chase, but for the community she now stood among. The neighborhood had changed, and so had she.